Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Coffee with Dr. K. So today we're going to talk about boundaries and why boundaries are important to your little one. As you know, boundaries in our adulthood are super important because we need boundaries so that people don't take advantage of us, right? Don't take advantage of our time, our well-being. But your little ones, they need boundaries too. And so what I wanted to talk to you a little bit about today is how your infant or your child utilized boundaries physically when they were little versus the boundaries that they need you to help them set as they continue to grow and develop. Now, when your child was in the womb, they enjoyed the boundaries of the mother's womb. They sought refuge in the womb. They were safe, they were secure, they were nurtured, they received everything that they needed in the womb. And that womb was actually a physical boundary. So your infant came out of the womb used to being enclosed, being wrapped tight, having something compressing on their head and their shoulders and their bottom and their legs. That's what they were used to. And that actually was a source of comfort for them. Now, when your infant starts to develop and they're getting bigger and they start to approach about 1.5, 2 years old, they actually start to realize that they don't really need those boundaries, those physical boundaries as much anymore. In fact, while when they were infants, they thought that mom and baby were the same, one person. How you felt, they felt. Believe it or not, there is a connection, a nervous system connection that we're not going to go into in this video. But there's a nervous system connection between mom and baby in those first formative months of life. But once your child starts to hit closer to 2, that time that we like to call the terrible twos, there's a reason for that. That's because they're starting to realize, I don't want to do it this way. I don't want to do it her way. I don't want to do it your way. I want to do it my own way. This is a stage of what we call autonomy. And it's in this stage that we need to set boundaries for our children. So when your baby was little, these boundaries kept them safe and feeling secure. But now that they're getting older and they're more autonomous and they're wanting to make their own decisions, it is our job as their caregivers, their parents, their source of authority to create these boundaries for them to keep them safe. Now, what do I mean when I say creating boundaries for your child? For example, if given the opportunity, your child would take your keys, play with them, they jingle, they sound great, but then they would hide them and move on to the next thing. And now it's time for us to go somewhere, and guess what? We have no keys, right? So in the early on stages, we have to set boundaries that, I know these keys are fun. I know you see mom and dad using these keys and they jingle, they sound great, but they're not a toy. So let's not play with these keys. Same thing applies to household items. They might reach a pair of scissors and think, oh, this is great. I've seen mom use these all the time, or I've seen my older sister use these. And then they take said scissors and they take off running down the hallway. This is a point where we have to set a boundary, Yes, of course, we get the scissors out of the way, out of reach. But in the event that someone put them within reach, the boundary is you take them away and you replace the scissors with something else. Understanding a tantrum probably will ensue because who likes having something taken away from them? But your child needs to understand this is a toy, this is not. However, how about we play with this? So those are just some simple examples of setting boundaries. The reason why this is important is because as a healthcare provider, as a pediatric physical therapist, I've worked with lots of children who don't understand boundaries yet. If they're in a park and they run into a parking lot, you call their name and they're not used to you placing a demand on them or placing a boundary on them, and they keep going, then it's unsafe. So I know it seems like something that they'll get, but I want to reiterate the importance of setting these boundaries at an early age, especially when your child hits that autonomy phase of development. There will be lots of tantrums, and the tantrums are because they're starting to make their own decisions and they want to be left to do that. So there are theories, especially sometimes in like Montessori learning and things like that, to where you allow a child to explore and to do what they need to do to problem solve, to figure it out. I agree with that. I love that. I think it's brilliant. But there's a big old however in there for me. However, when it comes to maintaining that child's safety, keeping them safe, well, and alive, that is when you as the parent must step in and set the framework. That framework are the boundaries. And the boundaries are the things that your little one can do, cannot do. You have this level of freedom, you have that level of freedom. It's important for we as caregivers and parents to set those boundaries and to set them early on. The earlier we start with these boundaries, the easier the transition into more mature toddlerhood and preschooler age will be, because they will recognize you, mom, dad, caregiver, as a source of authority. And though they don't agree with you, and though they really want to do what they want to do, at the end of the day, without yelling, screaming, tugging, and fighting, if they are used to you and the boundaries you've set, it really does make it an easier transition. I'm not saying there won't be any tears. I'm not saying there won't be any tantrums. What I am saying is, mom, dad, caregivers, you got to start early with these boundaries. Don't let it get too far, too many years down, because it gets harder to correct. So set your boundaries. They kept your little ones safe when they were infants. They'll keep them safe and alive as they grow older. I hope you guys enjoyed this brief video on boundaries. I look forward to meeting with you again on the next episode of Coffee with Kay. Take care.